Hello, my name is Diane, and today I want to talk about all of the books that I DNF'd in 2023, all the books I did not finish. I got to very different points in all of these. Some of them I just read the setup and I just wasn't clicking with the writing or the main character. Some of them I got halfway through and just the plot wasn't moving along enough for me. Some of these are from very early on in the year, some of them are a little bit more recent, so I'm not going to talk too in depth about the summaries of any of these, just because for the most part I don't remember too many details about all of them, and the ones I do remember I didn't really read that much of, so I don't know that I could accurately give you a good summary of what they're actually about. But I will talk about kind of why they didn't work for me personally. Maybe some of these are your favorites and you think I'm wrong, that's fine. But these all, for some reason, the style, the setting, the plot, the main character weren't clicking for me, and I gave up to move on to something that worked a lot better for me. The first book I have is The Unspoken Name by A.K. Larkwood. This follows, I think she's an orc or a half orc, something like that. And I don't know, she does something. She's being trained to do something. I didn't really care about the main character, and there's a small time jump at early on in the book. We get the general setup and then we jump ahead just a little bit to where she's somewhere else doing the thing she's been training to do. And I felt like the things that happened in that time jump would have been so interesting, and I was really disappointed that we skipped ahead. I also just wasn't that invested in her as a character, so I ended up just giving up on this pretty early into it. Wild Massive by Scott O'More. This, I forget how far into this I got. I don't think I got too far. Maybe like 10 to 15%, I think. It's such a weird sci-fi world. There were so many strange things about the world, and it felt like there was a lot there. I just didn't feel like I ever understood it, and while I liked the initial setup where we meet our main character, once we got more into it and started jumping around to other characters in different points in time, I just felt like the more information I was getting, the less I was understanding. And that's just not very fun for me when I'm reading that type of sci-fi. I want to have some concept of the world and what's going on and what the point is, and I just didn't feel like I had that. Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott. This book I got about halfway into. It's two siblings who inherited the Baba Yaga house. I don't know, it's very strange. I didn't like either of the main characters. I didn't think either one of them were likable. We do get part of the story is kind of a mystery, and part of the story is specifically following the house and Baba Yaga, and that part of the story I really liked. The other part of the story was fine, and then the two siblings, I just didn't like their parts of the story, and they were the main part of the story, so it didn't make sense for me. It's a fairly long book. I didn't feel like finishing it when I only cared about part of the story. Nocturne by Alyssa Weiss. I don't think this is a bad story. It is what I expected it to be, but it follows like a ballerina in the city who gets a mysterious benefactor, and that's the general setup for the story and as far as I got into it. But I just am not that into that type of story, but I thought I would give it a try for something different. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for me. It worked out the way I expected it to, honestly, but that type of story just isn't what appeals to me. A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. This is a sci-fi about someone who, the diplomat or something, is killed, and then she is the next in line and comes to fill in for that position. And I didn't care about the main character at all, and there's this murder mystery happening around her that she is potentially the next target of because of her position, and she didn't seem to care about it at all. Like, she didn't seem invested in figuring out what was going on or even concerned that she might be the next target. She was just more interested in learning about the culture of this place, but even the specific cultural things she cared about, I just didn't care about. I got about halfway through this and I was just so uninterested in her and what she was doing, the things that she was interested in doing. So I just gave up on it. I've heard a lot of great things about this book and the sequel especially. So I'm pretty sure I'm in the minority here, but I just didn't click with the character or what was going on. Kagen the Dam by Jonathan Mayberry. This one for me came down to writing style. The setup, it follows like a king's guard. He's responsible for the heirs, the king's children, keeping them safe. And there's an attack on the castle one night where he is incapacitated somehow and unable to stop the attack and keep the children safe. And I liked the main character. I liked the plot and the initial setup and what the actual plot of the story was, but I just didn't like the way things were being described. The writing felt very crude to me for my personal taste. I don't know, some of the things being described were just made me uncomfortable in a way that I didn't want to continue on with the story if that's what was happening and being described that early on in the story. I didn't really feel the need to see if there was more or less of that going forward, which was unfortunate because I was really looking forward to this one. The Drowned Woods by Emily Lloyd-Jones. I got about halfway through this one, and it's sort of a heist-style fantasy, and the main character was fine, but about halfway through I felt like we were still getting the group together, and the plot hadn't progressed nearly as much as I had wanted it to. I just didn't feel like enough was happening by the midpoint in the book. I wanted to really be getting into things and have more heist things happening, but we were still meeting the characters and collecting the group before the actual plot took off. And I just didn't care about the characters enough to spend that time with them when I wanted the plot to also be moving forward. The Ninth Hour by Alice McDermott. This takes place in a city in, I think, the 20s, and a man tampers with the gas line in his apartment and intentionally causes an explosion, and we follow the people around him in the aftermath of this act and how it affected his family and the people close to him. And I just didn't feel that connected with the characters that we were following. I didn't really feel like, even though this was a very tragic, intentional event, it didn't feel like it really hit in the book for me. I don't know, it just didn't really strike me in the way that I thought that it would. The Sun and the Void by Gabriela Romero Lacruz. This one I've heard good things about, the plot and the setting, but I just didn't connect with either of the main characters. There's two main characters and the story alternates between them, and I didn't think that they were distinct enough for me to not only care about them, but to care about their specific situations, because they just felt too similar when we were bouncing back and forth between them for me to feel like I was really building up either character in my mind. The Jasad Heir by Sarah Hashem. This follows a main character. I think her family was killed and now she's in hiding, and then somebody discovers her finally, and this happens pretty early in the book. It's the general setup. That's as far as I got, is after she was discovered, and I just didn't care about the main character, which in this kind of story I feel like you have to care about the main character and the stakes surrounding the situation that they're in, and I just didn't really click with her at all. I didn't really care what the outcome was of her being discovered. Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. This is the sequel to King of Scars, which is the Nikolai duology in the Grisha universe. And I was pretty disappointed by King of Scars. Nikolai was my favorite character in the Grisha trilogy, and as much as I liked the female main characters in that book, I felt like Nikolai was the weakest of the point of view characters, which was really unfortunate because that's the whole reason I went into this duology, was because I liked that character. So after quite a while between that book and this sequel, I had lost even more interest in it, so I gave it a shot to see if I wanted to just finish out the series, but after that long removed from a book that I was disappointed in, I just really didn't care about what was going on or the characters or picking up where their stories left off. Dragonfall by L.R. Lamb. I didn't get very far into this book. I wasn't connecting with the writing style. It's a male dragon he's like the last male of his kind, and he has to trick someone into a human, I think, into helping him to save his kind. And it alternates between the dragon and the person that he needs to work with or fool into working with him. And I just didn't really jive with the writing style. It just wasn't making me feel invested in what was going on. So I gave up. And the last book is The Keeper's Six by Kate Elliott. This follows a woman who her son is in danger, so she gets her old group back together to try and save him. I think I got about halfway into this and I felt like not a whole lot had happened, and everything that had happened felt like it happened too easily. Like all of the obstacles in her way of figuring out what happened to her son and what she needs to do to help him just felt like they came very easily. She just kind of showed up and got the information that she wanted, basically. And that was kind of disappointing for me. I like when characters have to actually work for something and not just kind of roll through the plot, and that's just how it felt to me. So those are all of the books that I DNF'd this year. Not too many, considering how many books I did finish. And I don't necessarily think any of these books are bad books. They just weren't books for me and my personal reading taste. Let me know if you've read any of these books, whether you agree or disagree with me about them. I'd like to hear about it. That's all for me today. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.